Hello and welcome to another Sit by the Fire with an amazing soul who has taken his journey of financial awareness and the executive side of helping companies understand their financials and the strategy behind that so they can grow. And he's going to share that with us today, and so many wonderful insights, including a method that he designed that you're going to want to hear about and take notes and find out more about. So we are going to be insightful. We're going to be educated here by Jeff Newkirk. I'm your host, Tina Marie St.Cyr, and here we go. So Jeff, a little bit about your background. You spent so many wonderful years, 30 years in corporate America, fighting problems and challenges and understanding the numbers in a corporation and in companies. And so can we start there in your journey of the things that came across your desk, the things you learned in meetings, and where you took companies from where they were to where they needed to be? What are some of those, as we call it, war stories that you participated in?
Yeah. So when you emphasize 30, though, I just want to make it clear I started when I was like 10. So
of course, you're brilliant. Right out of the womb, you're totally brilliant and ready to go. Me too.
No. But all those years of experience gave me a chance to really go through a number of different situations that help, get to where I am today. And when you're in finance or even operations and you get to the level where you are responsible for a company's financial situation and you have to make really difficult decisions, and those difficult decisions can impact people's lives, you really take a different perspective on things. And for me, it was very important to look past the numbers. So you have to know the numbers, of course. That's the kind of the foundation, the competency that you have to do the job.
Right.
But beyond that, you really need to be cognizant of how those numbers are impacting people. And that's where sometimes I kind of got into these moral dilemmas, because I would always look for an answer that was beyond the numbers that would impact people in a positive way.
Right.
So I didn't want to, the last resort, it was always cost cutting, right? Always bottom line growth. And so when it's bottom line growth, there's two sides of the equation, right? You either increase your revenues or decrease your expenses.
Right.
If the market is such that increasing your revenues was limited, then you're looking at the expense side. What's the biggest expense? Well, in service organizations where I worked most of the time, it was people. And if you're going to cut expenses and that's people, what are you going to do? How many positions are you going to cut? So for me, it was always, that's the very, very last resort, because so often as financial managers, CFOs, they don't think about the long-term impact. It's like, what are we going to do next quarter? Okay, well, next quarter will be better, but what's going to happen a year or two from now?
Yeah.
So, I faced a lot of those situations.
I can see that. Did you ever talk any, senior level directors or executives or CEOs off the ledge of cutting people? And was there ever a way to trim or trash other things, systems, processes, maybe even product lines? I've seen where product lines weren't generating the ROI that that they had predicted, and they adjust and pivot, on the floor in operations. Anything like that?
Absolutely. There's always ways to look at increasing the bottom line aside from the people part, the people aspect. And there were a number of situations where we had, pretty spirited conversation about cost cutting. And I was always emphatic about keeping people. And, many times.
Thank you for going to bat for them. They probably
know. And I think part of it is that I've seen firsthand good leadership, strong leadership, and not so strong leadership. And that not so strong leadership comes into play more than we'd like. And, sometimes we don't always make the tough decisions, or, we take the easy road And the easy road, might get a short-term gain, but it's not long-term. It's not
Yeah.
sustainable. So yeah, I always went to bat for as often as I could for people. So
That's probably definitely a human habit, right? We want to get the short-term gain and have the lack of vision and forward movement. So it's
absolutely.
interesting. We're talking about all these directions and the life, the forward and the rear. We're going to talk about rear view in a second. That's
Yeah, you
segueing
bet.
into. So from your experience here in the corporate world and all the different projects that you worked with and on and contributed towards, I want to ask one question first before we get to what you're doing today is, I ask this question for those that are listening that are also at this juncture in their careers,
Mhm.
because sometimes we get to that place where we go, I want to jump ship, or in today's economy, maybe we've been cut and we have a choice.
Yeah.
What had you say, I'm going to go from being an executive into starting your own business?
Great question. So there were a number of situations, and I'm sure you can appreciate over 30 years that was involved with that helped me grow as a leader and in my career. And I talked about leadership and lots of strong leaders and lots of not so strong leaders.
Right.
And I felt like it was really my calling. So years ago, I was at it was actually when I was working on my doctorate degree. My wife and I were at a family dinner, and so I was talking to a distant relative who I didn't really know that well, but were making small talk, and it was a good conversation. And in the middle of the conversation, she just stopped and said, "You know, we're going to read about you one day. I want to remember you."
Oh, wow.
And I was like,
That's
"What?" Like, where did that come from? She said, "No, you have a lot of potential, and you're going to do something pretty significant." I'm like, "Okay." I didn't really know how to take that, but that was 1996 or seven,
Hmm?
and so all these years later, that always stuck with me, and I thought, I haven't fulfilled my purpose.
Hmm.
My
Did you feel that
purpose is,
inside yourself?
yeah, I
Yeah.
really did.
Yeah.
And then more recently, it was a coworker that said, "Jeff, you can do a whole lot more than what you're doing now."
Hmm.
And so those two situations have really, really stuck with me. And it was time. It was time to really take that leap and develop an opportunity where I could positively impact lots of people.
There you go.
And
And
that's what I
thank you
want
for
to do.
taking the leap. Thank you for taking the leap. It's not
You
easy, is
bet.
it? I mean, like,
Oh,
if
you
you
got to
go
be a
back
risk
to that
taker.
moment, huh?
You got to be a risk taker,
Yeah.
right?
And here you are
Mhm.
in finance. They don't want financial people to be risk takers.
No, no, but they also don't necessarily want finance people to be people. They're
Yeah.
more concerned about the numbers. And it's always comforting when I come across somebody who is very skilled in the numbers, whether they're an engineer, accountant, finance, but they also have that compassion.
That's
We got to
beautiful.
have compassion.
We need so much more of that in this world, don't we?
Oh, amen.
Yes. And so, no, you help clients, like what's your avatar client? What would you love? The person that you'd love to help. And then we're going to dive into how you help them.
Yeah.
Who is it that you'd say, I absolutely love whenever this type of person calls and says, hey, how can you help me? Who is that?
Yeah. Well, it's somebody that can go to the next level, and whether it's in their business or professionally, and they might not really recognize how they can get to the next level, and they might even be sort of on the fence as to whether they want to work with a business coach or not. That's the type of person where I love to just have that conversation and probe a little bit as to what's going on in their life and their business, and make it abundantly clear that if they were to uh, take on this new strategy of working with somebody else, we can get them to a new level.
Yes.
And that's a great feeling. So because then I know it's going to be a win-win.
Yeah. And it takes not only curiosity about that next level for ourselves, it takes courage Whenever we
Oh,
open up ourselves to saying, hey, maybe I don't have the answers. And more than that, maybe if I think I have the answers, sometimes I can't execute at the same level that I
right,
believe I need
right.
to. So can we speak to that? The need for courage to honestly ask for sincere help, right? Sincere help.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I think of the, I call it the 13 absolutes of leadership. So,
Mm-hmm.
I've learned a lot of John Maxwell, Simon Sinek,
Mm-hmm.
Patrick Lencioni. I mean, and 30 years of experience. But
There you go.
I think there are 13 absolutes that you have to have for strong leadership. And one of those is courage.
Mm.
You've got to have courage to do, make those tough decisions. And for me, I'm a person of faith, so I always think about, having courage. What does that mean? Well, in the Bible, it says 365 times, "Do not be afraid."
Really?
So I'm
How many
thinking,
times?
wow, 365, one for each day.
That's so cool. You could write a book on
So, so if that's the case, and it is,
it. Mm-hmm.
then I'm thinking, God is really serious about us not being afraid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
So have
I'm
courage.
reminded of JFK, right? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself,
Fear
right?
itself. All right.
I
Yeah.
hear that in my head at least once a week, just to keep a measurement and an understanding, governance over fear. It's always with
Oh, yeah. And it's easy to become fearful. I mean, I'm like the master of becoming fearful. But
That's how you can
I
teach not to.
but it doesn't serve any purpose, right? It serves no
No,
purpose.
it serves no purpose whatsoever. So you touched on, you're pretty educated, Jeff.
Yeah.
And so, and that's needed. We whenever we're partnering with a coach, a consultant, a strategist that's going to be able to take an honest look at where we are, we need somebody who's going to be able to ask the right questions. And we need somebody that we
Absolutely.
can trust. And, I've known you for a while, and I love your way of being is so easy to connect to, your sincerity, your empathy, and the
Thank you.
understanding
Thank you.
that it's easy. It's not easy. However, with partnership and respect and understanding, the road is not so lonely, right?
That's
To get
right.
to where we want to be. And so you've got an MBA and you've got a
I do.
doctorate. What's your doctorate in, Jeff?
It's a doctor of education.
Oh,
And in my research, I sort of took a different twist. And this was sort of at the time I didn't know it, but it was like the first step in developing the rear view mirror approach. But
cool.
so in my research, what I wanted to do was have one measure, like one ratio that business owners could look to
Mhm.
say are we successful or are we not successful? And I called it the success factor ratio. And it was taking metrics from the marketing and sales area, the finance and accounting area, the human resources area, and then the operations area, combine it all into one success factor ratio. So that was my research, and I tried to put it into use after I was done, with honestly minimal success, but I didn't really uh, explore it the right way. So that was sort of the first step in the
What you have,
RVM, or the rear view mirror. Yeah.
and I love this. Whenever we think of forward thinking, it's kind of funny because you say the rear view methods, right, for forward
Right.
thinking. So tell
Right.
us what this rear view method is for
Yeah. Yeah.
business and for entrepreneurs.
So you know what? Everybody's got to have their one thing, right? The one thing that is, their go-to.
Mhm.
And so recently relocated to Texas from Illinois. So
Woohoo!
I had to go. Yes. Amen. Glad to be in Texas, but making many trips back to Illinois. And on one of my trips, I was trying to, what is my one thing? What is my one thing?
Mhm.
And I was thinking back to the success factor ratio and driving through rural Missouri, unfortunately going way too fast, uh,
Mhm.
past a state trooper, Missouri state trooper. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a ticket, and not the way I wanted this trip to go. So I looked in the my rear view mirror,
Right.
and saw the state trooper. And then I, obviously slowed down and looked in the rear view, slowed down, rear view, slowed down. And then I noticed that he didn't, I wasn't getting pulled over, but it was like, I'm looking in the rear view. I'm looking in my past
Right.
for a better future, when my better future is I don't want to get a ticket, right?
Mhm.
So if we look in the past, if we just take that concept and we
Right.
look in our past for lessons learned, do our review of what got us to where we are today, then we can examine it more closely and adjust those things that need to be adjusted
Mhm.
for a much better future.
Awesome.
Much better. So the whole point is know where we were,
Mhm.
know how we got here, adjust what we need to have a better future outcome.
I love it. That's, something that sounds so simple because we could completely connect with what you're saying. It takes time to assess where we are. It takes
Mhm.
time to, and as business owners, I set aside 2 90-minute sessions a week to simply observe my business, ask myself deeper questions, see where my measurements are coming in,
Mhm.
assess and analyze, and then consider. And that's not typical for people to take that much time. And I've learned that if I didn't, I'm just on a hamster wheel. So
Right.
help us understand what the rear view method is and how that benefits business owners.
Yeah. So there are different metrics that you can look at in different parts of your business, but let's just take the financial, because that's sort of my background. And I think as a small business owner or leader within an organization, there the bottom line is the bottom line. I mean, that's the reality. We have, in order
Right.
to have a sustainable business, we have to cover expenses and we have to have that profitability that'll lead us into the future. So when we start with the review, and that's the first step, review, we need to know what metrics to look at. So I always look at a couple of key financial metrics: cash, because
Mm-hmm.
cash, like it or not, cash is king. If we don't have
King, queen,
cash,
and everything else.
yes, it is. Yes, it is. Absolutely. If we
Mhm.
don't have cash, we will not be able to pay our bills and we won't be able to have a sustainable business. So we've got to know what our cash balance is and we got to know where to find it. How do we find it? It's in the balance sheet. We have to know what our operating margin is. Our operating margin is what's left over after we pay for all those expenses associated with our product or service. It includes all the selling and administrative, it includes all the cost of goods. So that's the margin that we have to look at for our business specifically. It doesn't include all the non-operating stuff, but it includes all of those expenses critical to your product or your service. So operating margin.
Right.
And and then finally, we need to know in the end, what is the profitability of our business? So let's now look at what are the non-operating issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because if our non-operating issues, if they're carrying the business, meaning perhaps our operating margin is negative, but our profitability is positive, that means there's non-operating stuff going on that we need to be aware of, but it can't sustain your business. So we need to know what that is. So that's really the starting point. So we need, because when we go
Yeah.
through the review, we have to know, well, what do we review? What do we look at?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are the key metrics that I'd start with. And then that's going to open up some more questions, which is
Oh,
the examination step. So
and
now we're
so
going to examine the detail.
yeah, and so on that review part, whenever I'm listening in the mindset of our listeners that are saying, I started a business because I have a passion in it, or maybe I inherited a business because it was my family's business, or I have a business degree and I formed a partnership with one of my partners and we bought a business and now we're supposed to be operating it. So there's a part of the business owner and the business mindset that we know we're going to look at numbers. We know we need to understand our financials, but even looking at operating margin, I've seen where business owners throw so many things into what they believe is operational or the
Hmm.
operation margin, and it has nothing to do with the production directly of cash flow. And so there's
Right.
even confusion at the granular level
Hmm.
what goes into that, and you help your clients with that, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, it all starts with making sure that your books are accurate. And in order to have an accurate set of books, you have to have all of your accounts lined up. You have to be able to properly record your transactions.
Mhm.
And that all starts with the bookkeeping. So for
Right.
example, I have working with a client recently where we really just started at square one, and that square one was getting the books lined up. So we set up the chart of accounts and properly allocated the revenue, properly allocated the expenses. So we could look at operating margin and know how that business was performing.
And trust it.
If the yeah, if the books aren't accurate, then I mean that's not going to give you the information that you need to know.
Exactly. And so the second part of the review method is the examination phase. And what do you do in that with your clients?
Yeah, so let's say, for example, just as I mentioned earlier, the operating margin is negative, operating income is negative, but your profitability, your net income is positive. So that's a flag, right? I mean, so
Mhm.
now
Yeah.
we've reviewed it. We know that there's something else that we need to look at. Now let's examine. Let's examine the detail of those statements that's going to give us that information. So we need to know, why is our operating margin negative? And we need to know why our profitability is positive.
Yeah. I don't
And
even know how those things add up.
well, that means you have some non-operating income that's
Mhm.
coming in that is, basically compensating for your negative operating
Oh,
margin.
I see. I see.
So you need to know, well, what is that non-operating? Is that something that's sustainable? Probably not.
Mhm.
And then if your operating margin is negative, why is that? We need to look at
Yeah.
both
What's
sides
the
of the
new trend?
equation. What do we need to do on the revenue side? What do we need to do on the expense side? So that's the examination. And there's no real step one, step two in the examination, because that's going to be based on what you find out in the review.
Mhm. And through that, do you also dive into sales and sales structures and compensation plans and things of that nature?
It depends on what you find out. But if for example the operating margin is negative, let's
Mhm.
look at that. So now you know that you are not operating. Your financial performance of your business is not where it needs to be for
Right.
sustainability. Now let's go back and why is that? Why is that? Are your sales down? Okay, if they are, then we need to look at that. Let's dive in and examine the sales aspect. Is your gross revenue exactly what you expected? Okay, well, maybe then it's doing okay, but then the expense side is then not performing to what you expected. So the examination step is going to take you a bunch of different ways, and certainly looking at sales in more detail could be
Right.
one of those, no question.
Yeah. Because a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners just say sell more, sell more, sell more, make more money, make more money.
Absolutely, but
However, it
another,
could be going into a broken utilization of the funds.
yeah, and another key metric that is so important is break even. It's if your break even is such that you're gonna, no matter how much product you sell, how many
Mhm.
services you sell, you'll always lose because your break even is too
So
low.
you're aiming at the wrong number. Is
Yeah,
what it is. You're aiming
exactly.
at the wrong number. And I've seen that too, where people think that their number should be one thing and it needs to be in anywhere from 10 to 20% higher than that.
Yeah,
Otherwise, they
right.
come in at the end of the year and they talk to their accountant. Their accountant goes, "You have a great year. You have no money." So it's
Yeah,
a
well, that's a
great year.
problem.
Great
Yeah,
year. You're
so
25% up over last year, and you have no money.
yeah. So, maybe your price is too low,
Yeah,
or
right. And where's
your
that
variable
market?
costs are too high,
Mhm.
So yes, there's always more to examine.
And then there's the A. So we're spelling out rear, right? Out
Yes,
of the
right.
review. So
So
we've covered the R, we've covered the E, and so help us understand what is the A in the review.
yeah, so that's the adjust step. So this is the step where you correct any of the areas that need to be changed based on what you've examined. So let's take sales. Let's say that sales was not what you expected, and you discovered that your break even is too low. So you compared your sales price to the market and discovered, well, our prices are too low. And if we increased our prices, then our break even would be better, our operating margin would increase. It wouldn't adversely affect sales volume because the market would expect a sales price that is higher. So we adjust the price. So that's the adjust for that one variable.
Yeah, the number one thing that I've seen in adjusting a sales price isn't about the market's adaptability or adoption of that new sales price. It's the adoption in the salesperson's mind of being able to speak that new price tag
Right.
to its marketplace, because we're conditioned and we've been saying one thing one way, and our nervous system got adjusted to that and likes it and it feels safe and secure. And then whenever we increase our prices, that nervous system response is like, oh, are they going to be okay with that? Are people going to sell? Are they going to buy? It's like, and so I was given some advice once, and it was the sales price is never a problem for the customer. It's always a problem for the salesperson. And so
Mm-hmm.
I realize, whenever we're adjusting our own pricing, that we need to practice. And so there's another hack that I learned about adjusting our pricing so that we can recondition our nervous system and get really okay with it. And
Yes,
let's
absolutely.
say, let's say that you're a service person and your billable rate is 300 an hour, right? Let's say
Hmm.
300 an hour, and you've increased it to 300 an hour. It was once 150 an hour. You find market conditions could allow you and your value to go double that. So now you're going to bill out at 300 an hour, but your nervous system's still back at 150, right? And so in order to redo that, you would practice in the mirror or practice with a friend. So how much are your services? My services are 3,000 an hour. And so you 10 times it, right? You 10 times it and you get used to saying 3,000 an hour, 3,000 an hour. And then whenever you're really going to say 300 an hour, it's so much easier.
Yeah, it's like, wow, it's not so bad, right? But
Yes.
the key word in what you said is value, right?
Yes.
It's value. And when you believe in the value that you're providing, whether you're selling a product or a service or it's your billable hours, whatever the case is, if you truly believe that there's value there,
Hmm.
it's not hard,
Not at all,
not
because
hard
you
because you
know what
believe
you're
in it.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And more than not, we've seen the results that
Yeah.
we bring to our client base, right? And so now
Yes.
we're at R again. Let's talk
Ah,
about
yeah. So the
R,
revise, yeah. So
revise.
now we're changing the future outcome, the expectations of our future outcome. So taking that sales price and carrying it through to the final step of revise, that allows us to change what we expect in our future operating income, our operating margin. It's going to change what we expect in our profitability. It's going to change what we expect in total revenue.
Right.
So now we're carrying it all the way through so we can change our future expectations. And what's important to keep in mind is that this is cyclical. The rear view is not a one and done. It's something that you continue to do every week or every month, depending on the business. Certainly, not every day, but that's way overkill. But certainly, you should do it on a regular basis. Just needs to be routine, knowing that it's never going to end. It's not a one and done. So when you revise the final step, you're going to have to go back and make sure you review,
Hmm.
examine, adjust, and revise again. So
And so it's staying fluid in our
absolutely.
business, and staying aware as
Hmm.
well, so that we spend that time. Like I mentioned earlier, I purposefully have 2 90-minute sessions in my week that are completely protected so that I can look at my numbers, look at my business, and make those adjustments. I'm in a practice, and it's to adjust things maybe once a month, because I need to give things a period of time to implement.
Hmm.
Sales scripting will probably adjust that once every couple months, maybe once every 3 months if it's not working. However, there's some things that we need to be more immediate about then and adjust more rapidly so we don't create more pain for our company. Are there any markers that you've seen in working with your clients based on how fast we need to react to adjust or not?
Yeah, it really depends on the type of business. So let me give a couple of examples. So I spent a number of years in healthcare, and in the healthcare setting, quite honestly, things move at a much slower pace uh, compared to like a retail setting. It doesn't mean that anything is less important or less meaningful. It's just that the business model moves at a little bit of a slower pace. So, addressing the review would be, monthly, certainly could be quarterly, but changes usually take place in a healthcare setting quarterly based on some monthly reviews. Now, that's different than if you were in a retail. If I owned uh, a retail shop at a mall, for example, I'm going to want to look at my numbers every day. Now, am I going to do the full, what I would call the full comprehensive rear view? Probably not every day, but I am going to do a quick rear view every day of some key metrics, whether that's daily sales on a certain product. I want to know how I'm doing every day. So I either move where the product is in the store or, put it on sale or something. So it depends on the type of business.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love that. And you've got your family. I know you got three kiddos and a
I do.
wonderful wife. And
Mm.
so here you are, a consultant, and they're probably your biggest cheerleaders as well.
Well, I everything in our careers they're important. What we do every day, it's important. But what really is more important for me is my family. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
my family is that's why I get up in the morning and do what I do, because I have three awesome kids and I have a wife of 32 years who is
Congratulations.
incredibly patient and tolerant with me. She's the better half for sure. So
We need
yeah,
those
I'm
people
very
in our life.
fortunate.
And so I want to highlight that you have an amazing best-selling book that people can pick up on Amazon and learn more about your method and
Yeah, thank you.
understandable solutions.
Yes, Understandable Solutions, just like the name of my company, Understandable
Love
Solutions.
that.
Confessions of a Forensic Financialist.
And
And
yeah, and that was a question I have, is like, what's forensic financials? It sounds so official and maybe
yeah,
CIA like. And so whenever if somebody's regarding, bringing you into their team, a forensic financialist, how could they, work with you and what would they expect?
yeah. So a forensic financialist is somebody that's going to come in and look at how your financial performance is going within your business, not to be confused with a forensic accountant. A
Mhm.
forensic accountant, that is, they're looking at, have you followed all of the rules and
Yeah.
regulations with regard to the accounting, whether it's generally accepted accounting principles. What a forensic financialist is doing is how are how are we performing financially?
Mhm.
Are there any elements of the business that can be performing better to improve your outcomes financially? And let's dissect what's happening within the statements. We talked about the looking at the P&L, the profit and loss statement, in a little bit more detail. Well, that's what a forensic financialist would do.
I love it. And that happens to be the name of your podcast too.
Yeah, yeah. It's a lot of fun. I gotta say, I never thought a podcast would be something that I would do, but yeah, the forensic financialist is going well. I
Uh-huh.
love it, and we talk about more than numbers.
Mhm.
So I said earlier, it's the people aspect that
Yeah.
is so important. So we can talk about numbers all day long, but it's really understanding people and how we can better lead people, better become better and stronger leaders ourselves. That's going to make things so much better overall
Completely.
in our business, in our society, in our country.
Mhm.
So yeah,
And the truth is, in all honesty, we look at numbers on a very frequent basis as leaders to make sure that things are healthy. And
absolutely.
if we have unhealthy numbers or the belief of unhealthy numbers or that we can't trust our numbers, it's going to impact our leadership and our way of being with others until we can regain that trust.
Yes, yeah, and it's how we handle it as leaders that we can move an organization or a group forward or not. And there are going to be, as I mentioned in my situation, there are tough situations that come around. You have to make tough decisions, whether you're looking at cutting people or changing a service, whatever the case is.
Hmm.
As strong leaders, it's how we deal with those tough situations that will help us to move forward. And I think John Maxwell says it best.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, we always have to be cognizant of adding value. We have to add value
True.
to others. We have to add
So true.
value to the situation. We have to add value to the organization. And that has to be top of mind in everything that we do. If it's not, then we'll lose perspective. And then we'll be concentrating on more short-term gain and more what's in it for me. But if you're always thinking of adding value in everything that you do, it really helps keep things in perspective. And part of that keeping in perspective is the people.
Yes. And that's the biggest part of our life, right?
No question.
Really is.
Yep.
And so I always ask my team for some questions. We pass your bio around and say, if you were here in the studio with me, what would you be asking our guests? And so we got some questions. And
All
so
right, great, awesome. Fire away.
here we go. So what is a characteristic that you see in all entrepreneurs?
Courage.
Yeah.
Courage. Yeah, because entrepreneurs, they take on risk, right? In order to take on risk, you've got to have courage. In order to get up every day and say, I'm going to make things happen, it
Mm-hmm.
takes courage. So, I've always said, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to embrace the day. Well, I've sort of changed that, and maybe it's been COVID. I get up every morning and I say, I'm going to attack the day.
Mm-hmm.
Embrace is sort of, that's okay, but I'm going to attack it and I'm
Right.
going to make things happen. So I think courage, courage.
Awesome. And so next question is, what would you have done differently at your first company, also your first career,
Mm.
now that you have a lifetime of the experiences that you have? Anything that you would have told that younger version of yourself to do different?
Oh man. Whew, that is a great,
That's a
great
big
question.
question.
Um, what I have done differently? Yeah, there are, yes. So courage,
Mhm,
and in my a number of early positions in my career,
mhm,
I didn't have the courage to speak up and say, this needs to be changed,
ah,
or we need to address this situation. And one situation that I am proud of that happened early in my career where I did show the courage. It was in a consulting situation. I was in a management consulting role, and I had to provide a business plan for a client, and the client was looking to do a real estate transaction, and
mhm,
it was my plan that was going to say, you know, part of the plan was going to say how much to pay for their land or the business, and so I knew that the client was going to be happy, but the person that they were going to do business with was not going to be happy.
mhm.
So it came because they wanted more money for their business. So they
Right.
came back and said, don't like the plan. Client came back to me and said, hey, Jeff, great plan. I really like your work, but is there any room that you can do something with the numbers? Any wiggle room with those numbers?
Mhm,
And I said, well, what do you mean wiggle room? I don't understand what you're looking for. Numbers are the numbers. Well, we really want to get this transaction, see it through, and we're just hoping that maybe the numbers will reflect a little bit more closely
ooh,
what the seller wants. So this was a point where I had an opportunity to continue my work with this client,
mhm.
or I could do what I thought was the right thing and say, no, the numbers are the numbers,
Yeah,
and
integrity.
relationship over. So
Wow.
I did. I stuck with it. I said, no, there's no wiggle room. I'm sorry you feel that way, and we ended our working relationship. But
Mhm.
I needed to do more of that early in my career.
Earlier, yeah. To check in with yourself and find that integrity, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the last question is, if you had a challenge to give entrepreneurs and business owners that are listening right now, what would that challenge for them to take today be?
The challenge would be to say you're in business for yourself, you have a passion for what you do. Now take that beyond your business. You need to certainly have a sustainable business model, make sure your business is successful, etc.
Mhm.
But what you do in your business should impact more than your business. You need to
Mm,
impact your community. You need to impact beyond the walls of your business. So
mm,
I would challenge them to think in bigger terms. What can you do, not just for your business, but what can you do to add value to your community, your environment.
Hmm.
That would be my challenge.
I love that. Challenge accepted, Jeff. Challenge accepted. And so you can
Good,
find out
good.
more about Jeff Newkirk and everything he brings to you and your business and your future and your happiness and the contribution you're going to give to the world as well. As find him on Facebook at Understandable Solutions Business and on Instagram at Understandable Solutions. I'm hanging out on IG, so I'll find you there definitely. And
Good.
then pick up his book on Amazon, Understandable Solutions, Confessions of a Forensic Financialist. And then you have your podcast, which is that weekly? There's probably tons of places they can find you
It's
out there.
it's weekly. It's weekly
Awesome.
on
You've
iTunes.
interviewed some really cool people.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I have, yeah, this past week, and it's going to air in I think just after Thanksgiving. Dory Clark. I mean,
I love her. She's
what?
so good.
Oh, it was great conversation, and it was pretty lively. We had some
Yeah,
passion going. Yeah, so
sweet.
we were
And you've
talking
also,
about perseverance.
oh yeah, we need more of that too. And
Oh,
you've interviewed one of our mentors, Michael McAllowitz.
yes, another great interview. He was so gracious, and that was, I think, within the first 5 episodes. So I was pretty, not that I'm experienced now, but I was definitely, early in the learning curve, and it was a
Oh,
great conversation. He's a great guy.
awesome. And you're going to bring so many more resources to everyone so that they can own their books, their numbers, and find their future, like you said. And I'm
You
glad
bet.
you didn't get a ticket that day. That's so good. And so your
Me too.
podcast, right? Your podcast is The Forensic Financialist. So find more about Jeff, add him to your favorites list, go hunt him down on Instagram and Facebook, and stay in touch. So last parting words for your entrepreneurs, your business owners, your CEOs that are saying, I have the courage now and I want to dive in. I need another partner in my corner to help me understand that what I'm creating, what I dream and what I'd love is actually going to be sustainable, viable, and get me to that profit that I'd love to have. And more than that, it's not just about profits. It's about us feeling happy in what we're bringing to the world. It's what our businesses are. And then having that financial vitality and freedom so we can enjoy our lives, not just be strapped to a business. What
Absolutely.
advice would you have for them as we say sayonara to this
Yeah.
another edition of the podcast?
Yeah, I would say don't ever feel like you're alone. You're not alone in making those decisions. There's always somebody, for example, a business coach or a colleague that will be there to help you as a trusted advisor and partner moving forward.
Awesome. Great words. We're not in it alone, right?
We're not, never.
Thank you so much. I love that we spend time together. Thank you for being who you are in our world, Jeff.
Oh, thank you. It's been great. Appreciate it, Tina Marie.